The fluorescent lights of Dallas International Airport buzzed overhead as I stood in the immigration line with my son David, both of us exhausted from the 14-hour flight from Singapore. At 67 years old, international travel wasn't as easy as it used to be, and my lower back ached from the cramped seats. David, my youngest at 32, had insisted on accompanying me on this business trip to finalize the sale of my late brother's property overseas. It was supposed to be straightforward: sign some papers, settle the estate, return home to Chicago within a week. Instead, it became the moment that revealed just how little I truly knew about the family I'd spent a lifetime building. We were nearly at the front of the line when the immigration officer, a stern-looking man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a name tag reading Martinez, looked up from his screen and locked eyes with me. Something flickered across his face. Recognition alarm. Something I couldn't quite identify. My passport was already in his hand, and as David stepped forward with his own documents, Officer Martinez did something that made my blood run cold. He stood up abruptly, moved around the counter with surprising speed, and grabbed my arm firmly, not violently, but with undeniable authority. "Sir, I need you to come with me," he said loudly enough for nearby travelers to hear. Then he leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered words that would replay in my mind for months to come. "Pretend I am arresting you and stay quiet. I've seen something terrifying on the security cameras regarding your family. Your life may depend on your cooperation right now." My heart lurched. David's face went pale. "Dad, what is happening?" "Officer, there must be some mistake." "Sir, please step back," Martinez said to David, his voice official and cold. "To me," he said more loudly, "Mr. Chen, you need to come with me for additional screening. This is standard procedure." But his grip on my arm told a different story. This was not standard procedure. His fingers pressed urgently against my forearm, and I could feel him trembling slightly. This man was afraid. Whatever he'd seen had genuinely frightened him. I went with him, my mind racing. Security cameras. My family. Danger. What could he possibly have seen? David called after me, his voice rising in panic. But other officers had appeared to block his path, explaining he'd need to wait in a designated area. I glanced back once and saw my son's confused, frightened face disappearing into the crowd. Martinez led me through a series of corridors, away from the public areas, deeper into the airport's restricted zones. We passed security checkpoints where officers nodded at Martinez, clearly recognizing him. Finally, we entered a small, windowless room with a table, 3 chairs, and a computer monitor mounted on the wall. He closed the door and locked it. "Sit down, Mr. Chen," he said, his official demeanor dropping away. He looked exhausted. Worried. "We don't have much time, and I need you to stay calm. What I am about to show you is going to be shocking, but I need you to understand that we're trying to protect you." "Protect me from what? What did you see?" He turned on the monitor. The screen split into 4 quadrants, showing different security camera angles. 30 minutes before your plane landed, we received an anonymous tip through our threat assessment hotline. The caller claimed there was a plot to intercept you upon your return to the United States. We get thousands of these tips. Most are nonsense, but this one included specific details. Your name, your flight number, your passport number, information that shouldn't be publicly available. My mouth went dry. Who would want to intercept me? I am a retired accountant. I don't have enemies. This has to be a mistake. That is what I thought too, Martinez said. Until I pulled up the security footage from your departure gate in Singapore and from our cameras here, tracking arrivals from your flight. He clicked a button, and the screen changed to show grainy footage of the Singapore airport. Do you recognize anyone in this footage? I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The camera showed the departure area near my gate. Crowds of people, some sitting, some standing, luggage everywhere. Then I saw her. My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, Michael's wife. My oldest son's wife of 8 years. She was partially hidden behind a pillar, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but I'd know her anywhere. She was watching the gate, watching me and David board. That is Rebecca, I said slowly. My son Michael's wife. But why would she be there? We didn't tell anyone except family about this trip. Michael said she was visiting her mother in Denver this week. Keep watching, Martinez said grimly. The footage showed Rebecca on her phone talking to someone. Then a man approached her. He was tall, muscular, with a shaved head and wearing all black. They spoke briefly. He nodded several times. Rebecca pulled something from her purse and handed it to him. Even in the grainy footage, I could see it was money, a significant amount. The man counted it, pocketed it, and walked away. Rebecca watched him go, then turned and left the airport. Now watch this, Martinez said, switching to another camera angle. This footage was from Dallas. Time stamped just 40 minutes ago. The same bald man from Singapore was here, in this airport, leaning against a wall near the baggage claim area. He was watching the arrival screens, watching for my flight. Ice flooded my veins. I don't understand. Why would Rebecca? She is family. She and Michael have 2 children. My grandchildren. Why would she be involved in something like this? Martinez pulled up another window on the screen. It showed a financial database entry. We ran a quick background check after receiving the threat. Mr. Chen, are you aware that your son Michael filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago? The room seemed to tilt. What? Number Michael runs a successful consulting firm. He and Rebecca just bought a new house. He has been helping me with investments. I stopped. A terrible realization dawning. He has been managing my portfolio. After my wife died 3 years ago, I gave him power of attorney over my financial affairs. I trusted him. He is my son. Mr. Chen, I am very sorry to tell you this, but we have reason to believe your son and his wife have been systematically draining your accounts. The anonymous tip included details about financial fraud. We've shared this information with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They'll want to speak with you. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. The man Rebecca paid in Singapore landed in Dallas 2 hours before you did. We believe he was hired to intercept you, possibly harm you before you could discover what has been done to your finances. I couldn't breathe. The room was too small, too hot. My own son, my firstborn, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped through college, walked down the aisle at his wedding. He'd been stealing from me, planning something worse. Where is David? I managed to ask. My other son, the one I was traveling with, is he safe? We have him in a secure waiting area. We're running checks on him as well. But the tip specifically mentioned your older son Michael and his wife. We don't believe David is involved, but we need to be cautious. A knock on the door made me jump. Martinez opened it to reveal a woman in a dark suit with an FBI badge clipped to her belt. She introduced herself as Agent Sarah Wilcox and sat down across from me. Mr. Chen, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you some questions about your financial arrangements with your son. But first you need to know that we've taken the suspect from Singapore into custody. He was carrying a weapon and a photograph of you. He is being questioned now. The next several hours were a blur. Agent Wilcox explained that Michael had been embezzling from my accounts for at least 18 months, possibly longer. He'd been making unauthorized withdrawals, transferring money to offshore accounts, forging my signature on documents. The total amount stolen was over $800,000, nearly my entire life savings. But why? I kept asking, why would he do this? If he needed money, I would have helped him. He is my son. Agent Wilcox's expression was sympathetic but professional. According to our preliminary investigation, your son has a severe gambling problem. He owes money to some very dangerous people. Rather than come to you for help, he chose to steal. And when you mentioned this trip to Singapore to handle your brother's estate, he panicked. Your brother left you a substantial inheritance. Michael was afraid you'd discover the theft when those new funds hit your accounts, and you reviewed your statements more carefully. The man from Singapore, whose name I later learned was Viktor Petrov, eventually confessed to everything under interrogation. Rebecca had contacted him through dark web channels, offering $50,000 to intercept me at the Dallas airport and take me to a secondary location. What would have happened at that secondary location? Petrov claimed not to know, but the weapon in his possession and the amount of money offered suggested nothing good. Rebecca's plan, as far as investigators could determine, was to have me disappear long enough for Michael to complete draining my accounts and disappear themselves. David was released after an hour and brought to the room where I was giving my statement. When he walked in and saw my face, he knew something terrible had happened. "Dad, what is going on? They won't tell me anything except that you are safe." I looked at my youngest son, the one who dropped everything to accompany me on this trip, who'd been patient with my slow walking pace and helped me with my luggage and made sure I took my blood pressure medication on time. The one who wasn't involved in this nightmare. "It is Michael," I said, my voice breaking, "and Rebecca. They've been stealing from me. They hired someone to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, devastating recognition. "The money," he whispered. 6 months ago, when I asked Michael if I could borrow some money to help with Jenny's medical bills, he said he couldn't help because he was having cash flow problems. But just last month, he and Rebecca went on that expensive cruise. I thought it was strange, but I didn't. Dad, I should have known something was wrong. I should have paid more attention. "This isn't your fault," I said firmly. "It is not your fault, and it is not mine. We trusted family. That is what you are supposed to do." The FBI arrested Michael and Rebecca that evening at their home in suburban Denver. Their children, my grandchildren Emma and Lucas, ages 6 and 4, were placed temporarily with Rebecca's parents. Michael and Rebecca both initially denied everything, but faced with the evidence, financial records, the confession from Viktor Petrov, security footage, phone records showing communication with Petrov, their stories began to fall apart. Michael eventually admitted to the embezzlement. He'd started small, he said, just borrowing a little to cover a bad bet. He'd planned to pay it back. But gambling debts had snowballed, and dangerous people had started making threats. He'd gotten desperate. Rebecca, according to Michael, had been the one to suggest hiring someone to delay my return until they could finish liquidating my remaining assets and flee the country. Michael claimed he'd never wanted to hurt me, just buy time. Rebecca claimed Michael had manipulated her, threatened her, forced her into compliance. The FBI believed they were both equally culpable. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life, and that is saying something for a man who'd buried his wife 3 years earlier. I stayed with David and his family in Austin rather than returning to my home in Chicago. I couldn't face the house where Michael had sat at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, hugging me goodbye, all while planning my destruction. David's wife Jennifer was endlessly kind, giving me their guest room and making sure I ate, even when I had no appetite. Their daughter Jenny, recovering from her surgery, would come and sit with me, telling me stories about school and her friends, providing a welcome distraction from the dark thoughts that haunted me. "Grandpa," she asked me one afternoon as we sat together on the back porch, "why do people do bad things?" At 10 years old, she knew something was wrong with Uncle Michael, though her parents had shielded her from the details. I thought carefully about how to answer. "Sometimes people make mistakes," I said. "And sometimes when they're afraid or desperate, they make even bigger mistakes trying to fix the first ones. It is like digging a hole and then digging deeper trying to get out." "Did Uncle Michael make mistakes?" "Yes, very serious mistakes." "Do you still love him?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Did I still love my son? The son who'd tried to rob me, possibly worse? "I love the person he used to be," I said finally. "Or the person I thought he was. I don't know if that person ever really existed, or if I just wanted to believe in him so badly that I couldn't see the truth." "That is sad," Jenny said, leaning against my shoulder. "I am sorry, Grandpa." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." The legal proceedings took months. Michael and Rebecca were both charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Viktor Petrov faced attempted kidnapping charges and weapons violations. The financial recovery process was even more complicated. Michael had hidden money in various accounts, some of which could be traced and recovered, others lost forever in cryptocurrency or overseas transfers. I had to make difficult decisions about my grandchildren. Emma and Lucas were innocent in all of this, but seeing them meant dealing with Rebecca's parents, who believed their daughter had been coerced and that I was being vindictive in pressing charges. David and Jennifer offered to take the children if Rebecca's parents couldn't or wouldn't, but the courts ultimately decided to keep them with their maternal grandparents, at least temporarily. The hardest day was when Michael's lawyer reached out asking if I'd write a letter to the judge requesting leniency. Michael wanted me to speak on his behalf, to tell the court he was a good father, a good son, who'd made mistakes. I spent 3 days struggling with that decision. David urged me to do whatever felt right, regardless of others' opinions. Jennifer thought I owed Michael nothing. Agent Wilcox, who'd stayed in touch throughout the investigation, reminded me that Michael's actions could have resulted in my death, and that leniency might be misplaced. In the end, I wrote a letter, but not the one Michael hoped for. I wrote honestly about my son, about the boy he'd been, the promise he'd shown, the man I'd hoped he would become. But I also wrote about the devastating betrayal, the fear I now lived with, the knowledge that my own child had been willing to sacrifice me for money. I wrote about my grandchildren who would grow up with an incarcerated father and the knowledge of what their parents had done. I wrote that I believed in accountability and consequences, even when they broke my heart. Michael was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Rebecca received 8 years. Viktor Petrov got 15. I recovered approximately 60% of my stolen money. The rest was gone, disappeared into the void of Michael's gambling debts and desperate attempts to cover his tracks. 6 months after the arrests, I finally returned to Chicago. The house felt different, haunted by memories that now seemed tainted. I thought my wife Catherine and I had raised good children, taught them values, showed them love. Had we failed somehow? Had I been too indulgent, too trusting, not attentive enough? David came to visit one weekend, arriving with boxes of Catherine's belongings I'd been unable to sort through. As we worked through old photo albums and mementos, we found letters Catherine had written to each of our children on their 18th birthdays. Michael's letter spoke of her pride in him, her hopes for his future, her unconditional love. It broke my heart all over again. Mom would have been devastated, David said quietly, holding the letter. Maybe it is a blessing she didn't live to see this. I think about that a lot, I admitted, but I also think she would have known how to handle it better than me. She was always better at the emotional things, at understanding people's hearts. Dad, you've handled this with more grace than anyone could expect. You are still here. You are healing. That is what matters. We found other letters too, ones Catherine had written to me over the years but never sent, kept in a small wooden box. In one written during a particularly difficult period when Michael was a teenager, she'd expressed worry about his impulsivity, his tendency to take shortcuts, his difficulty accepting responsibility. She'd been concerned even then. But we'd both convinced ourselves he'd outgrow it, that it was just teenage rebellion. Reading her words from beyond the grave, I realized that love and clear sight aren't mutually exclusive. Catherine had loved Michael deeply but had also seen his flaws clearly. I'd been the one who'd looked away, who'd made excuses, who'd enabled bad behavior in the name of trust. A year after the arrests, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I went to visit Michael in federal prison. David thought it was a terrible idea. Jennifer was worried it would re-traumatize me, but I needed to do it for my own closure, not for Michael's benefit. The visiting room was everything prison visiting rooms are in movies: cold, impersonal, monitored. Michael looked older, thinner, diminished in his prison uniform. When they brought him out and he saw me, he started crying. Dad, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't move to embrace him. I stayed seated on my side of the table. I didn't come here for your apology, Michael. I came here to tell you something important. He wiped his eyes, nodded, waited. I spent a year hating you, I said, a year asking myself where I went wrong, what I could have done differently. I blamed myself for being too trusting, too blind. But I've realized something. Your choices were your own. Not mine, not your mother's, not circumstance or bad luck or gambling addiction. You chose to steal from me. You chose to involve Rebecca. You chose to put my life in danger rather than face consequences. Those were your choices. I know, Dad, I know. I was desperate. I was afraid. I made terrible decisions. I am not finished, I interrupted. I also came here to tell you that I forgive you. His face crumpled. Dad, I forgive you because I need to, not because you've earned it. I forgive you so I can move forward with my life without carrying this weight. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, Michael. It doesn't mean we'll have a relationship again. It means I am releasing you from my expectations and myself from this pain. You'll serve your time, you'll live with what you've done, and I'll build a new life that doesn't include you. What about Emma and Lucas? Will you see them? I am working with their therapist and the court's on that. If and when they're ready, when they're old enough to understand, I'll be there for them if they want me. But that is about them, not you. I destroyed everything, Michael whispered. My family, your trust, my future. For what? For money I just threw away. That is your burden to carry now. I can't carry it for you anymore. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Michael asked, "Did you ever really know me, Dad, or did you just see what you wanted to see?" The question was more perceptive than I expected. I think I saw the best parts of you and hoped they were the whole picture. Maybe that was unfair to both of us. Maybe real love means seeing all of someone, the good and the bad, and being honest about both. When I left the prison that day, I felt lighter. Not happy, not healed, but lighter. The weight of expectation, of who I thought my son should be, had been crushing me. Letting it go, accepting reality, was its own kind of freedom. 2 years after that day at Dallas International Airport, I am learning to build a new life. I sold the Chicago house. Too many memories, too much space for one person. I bought a small condo near David and his family in Austin. I volunteer at a senior center teaching financial literacy to retirees, helping others avoid scams and fraud. Ironic perhaps, given my own story, but meaningful. I see Emma and Lucas occasionally now, supervised visits arranged through their therapist. They're confused about everything, dealing with their own trauma. I don't try to explain everything or defend myself. I just try to be present, to be a stable adult in their chaotic lives, to show them that love doesn't have to mean enabling destructive behavior. David and I have grown closer than ever. He asks me about his mother, about their childhood, helping me sort through memories and determine what was real and what was the story I wanted to believe. It is painful work, but necessary. Officer Martinez, the man who grabbed my arm that day and quite literally saved my life, has become an unlikely friend. He checks in every few months, and we've met for coffee several times. He told me that in 20 years of working airport security, he'd never had a case like mine, never had an anonymous tip be so accurate and so critical. "Someone was watching out for you that day," he said during one of our meetings. "Whether it was luck, fate, or guardian angels, you got a second chance. What you do with it matters. What I am doing with it is trying to live honestly. I date occasionally, nothing serious, just companionship and conversation. I travel though. Airports still make me nervous. I write letters to my grandchildren for them to read when they're older, explaining my perspective on what happened, making clear they're not responsible for their parents' choices. And sometimes, late at night, I allow myself to grieve. Not just for what Michael did, but for all the losses, Catherine. The family structure I thought was unbreakable, the naive trust I'll never have again. Grief isn't something you overcome. It is something you learn to carry differently. The most important lesson I've learned is that trust, once broken so profoundly, changes you fundamentally. I'll never again sign over power of attorney without multiple safeguards. I'll never again assume family means safety. But I've also learned that broken trust doesn't have to mean a broken life. It can mean a more honest life, a more careful life, but still, a life worth living. David asked me recently if I regret having children, given everything that happened with Michael. The question shocked me, but I understood why he asked it. I regret Michael's choices, I told him. I regret the pain caused to everyone, especially Emma and Lucas. But I don't regret you, or your sister, or the years when I believed we were all okay. Even if some of it was illusion, some of it was real. Your love has always been real, that matters. At 69 years old now, I understand that life is longer and more complicated than we expect, that people surprise us both beautifully and terribly, that forgiveness is about freedom, not reconciliation, that family isn't always sanctuary, and that sometimes the moments that almost destroy us also show us who we really are and what we're truly made of. That immigration officer grabbed my arm in an airport corridor and whispered words that changed everything. He'd seen something terrifying on security cameras, something about my family that I couldn't see myself, and in the 15 minutes that followed, my entire understanding of my life was dismantled and rebuilt into something more honest, more painful, but ultimately more real. I wouldn't choose this story for myself, but it is the story I have, and like Officer Martinez said, what I do with my second chance matters. So I choose to live it fully, honestly, and with eyes wide open to all of it, the beauty and the betrayal, the love and the loss. That is all any of us can do.